and welcome to Still Buffering, a sister's guide to teens through the ages. I am Riley Smurl.
I'm Sydney McElroy.
And I'm Taylor Smurl.
Hello, sisters.
Hello.
I was gonna try to say like hi, like Halloween.
No, that's
Halloween.
Halloween?
That sounds like that's just like a scary version of Halloween.
No, I know. That didn't work.
Halloween?
Halloween? Halloween?
I think when the word hello already exists, I don't think you can do that.
No.
No. Let's continue our spoopy train.
Yay.
Right?
That's not all aboard the spoopy train. Next up, conversation about stupid stuff, Bill.
Well, I mean, it's the month for it, and it's fun, and we all like scary things.
I'm just really tired today, guys.
You're always tired. That's
Yeah.
just a
Really
given.
tired.
You're the tiredest of the sisters three.
I'm a teenager. When am I not tired? I couldn't sleep last night, so I stayed up watching clips from episodes of Kitchen Nightmares. Which you know isn't a goof because I just told you about it before we were even recording.
Well, whose fault is that, Riley?
I mean, it's mine. I just couldn't sleep.
Yeah, that must be so tough. I was up late on the phone managing patients in the hospital, and then I had to get up at 6 a.m. and go back to the hospital.
Sydney, I am 16 years old. Do you think
I
there
can
is
handle
any
that
universe
kind of responsibility.
where I could have been on the phone with patients or doing anything of that caliber? No, because I am a child. So don't even, Sydney. Don't even.
Hey, tell that to Doogie Howser. That was
You mean Neil Patrick Harris, child actor?
Well, I don't think
a child actor.
Yeah, I think he would qualify as an adult actor.
I mean, he was a child actor. He was not a doctor.
Neil Patrick Harris.
Okay. This has been still buffering.
Full-fledged grown-up in PH.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah, he was a doctor at 16, right?
I think so. Oh.
What wasn't he 15 or 16?
Yeah.
That's a TV show. This isn't real life.
Based on true events.
Yeah, it says based on true events at the beginning, Riley.
It doesn't.
But if it did,
No, it doesn't.
you'd believe it, though.
No, I wouldn't. In
That's
no
all it
universe
takes.
would I believe that there was a real doctor at the age of 16. They wouldn't let anyone do that because 16-year-olds are stupid. Why would they let them be doctors?
Hey, all you 16-year-olds out there. She didn't mean that.
She's 16, too.
Think
so.
about the math behind that, though. Sydney, how many years post-undergrad were you doing schooling?
Oh, after undergrad?
After undergrad, so after 4 years.
After 4 years of college, I was in 4 years of medical school and 3 years of residency.
That's 11 years. You're telling me that a 5-year-old
Went to
would have
college?
had to finish. A 5-year-old would have had to finish high school by the time they were 5.
Well, but maybe you could cut that training. Residency has to be 3 years, but you could cut. You can do your undergrad degree in 3 years if you're aggressive at it. But that still only loses you 1 year, so they
That's
still would have had to
10
start
years.
college at
6
years.
they would have had to
old.
finish their high school and elementary school and middle school education by 6 years old.
Unless we
that is
assume,
impossible.
and I haven't seen Doogie Howser in a very long time. So unless we assume that Doogie Howser was a first-year resident, which is a physician, but is not, he is still in training in the first season of Doogie
I'm
Howser.
like 99%
Then-
positive he is just child doctor Doogie Howser.
That's minus the years of residency, whatever specialty he entered. So we could cut it down to maybe 7 years of medical training.
You're still looking at a 9-year-old being done with high school.
That's
So
possible.
on a scale of this whole episode, or can we please stop this right now? How long are we going to talk about Doogie Howser? Just want to give anybody listening a gauge so they know when to tune back in or turn it off.
I think I'm good now. I'm good. Are you all satisfied?
I was just trying to defend myself, Sydney.
Okay. Well, you still shouldn't be so tired. I'm 33 and I'm not as tired as you.
It is statistically proven that teens need more sleep.
We hear that every week. All right. Well, let's not talk about Doogie Howser anymore, because you know the thing about Doogie Howser? He wasn't a monster.
He's not spooky.
Someone else seems tired because their transitions are a little off.
Thanks, Riley. We were gonna not talk about Doogie Howser. We were gonna talk about monsters this week.
Oh, I got it. Hey, Riley, you're so tired. You're like the Walking Dead.
Hey! You know what that makes me think of? Zombies.
Smooth transition. Done.
That was really good, guys.
It is. I'm sure you're wondering, what do monsters have to do with teenagers? Other than the fact that is what they like to eat.
There
for
are
food.
some.
Riley, you know that monsters only eat teenagers.
I was waiting for it, Taylor. I was waiting for it. I was waiting for one of you two to say it.
But I think we were talking about various Halloween things and scary things and October-y things. And one thing about teen culture, especially more recently, is the inclusion of a lot of traditionally like horror movie villains or, antagonists only as popular culture figures. Kind of the evolution, especially in the teen world, of your classic movie monsters. If that's fair to say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think these are archetypal monsters we're going to be discussing. Things that have been around, for they're rooted in the origins of storytelling, but like every generation seems to reinterpret them based on, I guess, their particular outlook. Riley's generation seems to very much prize like sexy sparkliness. Am I wrong?
I guess that's fair.
This is the era of sexy sparkliness.
Well, to be fair, Damon and Stefan Salvatore don't sparkle. So they're vampires.
This reminds me of, there was a great Betty and Veronica issue where they have a fashion show that exemplifies the decades, and they're in the 90s when they're doing this fashion show, and they say, the 90s is the decade of drab and not too fab, or is it the decade of trash and splash? How do you define the decade currently, Riley?
I thought we just
Is
said
it glitter
sparkles and sun.
Sexy sparkles?
Sexy sparkles.
Okay.
Yeah, Sydney, both of those rhyme, and you just gave me like a split second to come up with a rhyming pair of words to describe the fashion of my generation. And I'm half asleep over here.
While you ponder, and you're welcome, audience, for the great podcast that Riley's sure to do. Let's talk about vampires.
Coffee.
I'm just gonna let you all just take this one over. Go ahead.
Let's talk about
Thing I'm gonna make
vampires.
fun of.
Well, all right. We're obviously, not going to trace these monsters back to sort of their origins, but definitely the earliest for my generation that I can think of having any sort of impact. The first idea of a vampire was probably more for Mom being a super big fan of Anne Rice, like Lestat, and what was the Interview with the Vampire?
Interview with the Vampire.
That was it. Hey, we had sexy vampires too, but they were Brad Pitt.
Which is rooted in, if you think about kind of like the origin of the vampire story, which had to do, again, we're not tracing the mythological roots of all these characters. We didn't do enough research for all that. But if you're looking at like older stories about people who drank blood or survived on the, blood of innocents, or used it to, give themselves power or strength or whatever. And then you move into kind of like the Dracula myth. You still have this like seductive kind of like charismatic, will like woo you into his castle and then drink your blood kind of character. And that's not a big jump into like the Lestat and,
I kind of
Louis vampires.
kind of zoned out for a minute. But I heard Dracula, and it made me think of Charlie's doll that is Count Micula, which is the Mickey Mouse version of Dracula.
Yes.
Okay, Dracula's a vampire. Count Micula is Mickey Dracula, so he's a vampire.
Yes.
Vampires have to drink blood to survive. We all know this from all the story, all the literature. Who does Mickey eat?
Okay, Count Micula does not drink blood. Count Micula says it. This is in the show, in Mickey's Monster Musical. He says,
Cannon, boom.
I do other things too. I drink grape juice too.
All right.
I don't buy it for a second.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
Mouse vampire hybrids perhaps survive on grape juice. That is clearly canon. That is clearly been established.
He says
If they're
that.
gonna survive off anything, like gotta have cheese in there somewhere, right? Not just like grape juice.
Now, typically, if you're not familiar with vampires, they don't eat cheese and they don't drink grape juice. They're supposed to drink
blood.
human blood.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Let's talk about how the transition process has transitioned through the years. You like that? Transition process from a human to a vampire. Has transitioned through the years.
Well, in the if we're talking about like,
it is very different in many different stories.
in old stories, I'm thinking of like, okay, in Buffy, how do you transition into a vampire?
interestingly enough, that if you watch Buffy from the beginning to the end, there's actually a little bit of a change of canon, and it's just kind of like, I think they just decided one way to do it was better than the other, because at the beginning they established that it's a whole sucking thing. Like, they drink your blood, you drink their blood, then you become a vampire. But we see very often as this series progresses that people just get bitten by a vampire and then they raise from the dead and become a vampire. So in Buffy, that is a change, unless there's a lot of like other ways sucking going on off screen, but they're like sympathetic characters that are often turned into vampires. So I don't think that they're necessarily being like choosing to turn into vampires. So I think that kind of has a bit of a hiccup as far as the mode of transition in Buffy.
And you have to, and it's a process that takes like a day or so, or maybe even more, because you get buried. You typically see these vampires bursting out of the ground. So they have been dead, and presumably a funeral has occurred, and they have been buried underground, and the tombstone's in place, and then the hand juts up from the grave below. That's usually the way the vampires show up in Buffy.
Right. I'm trying to think of the various vampire books and movies and such I've watched or read. How do they change in Twilight?
In Twilight, remember, you just get bitten by the vampire,
And you turn to a vampire?
Mm-hmm. You need the poison, or venom. They call it like a venom. Mm-hmm. And you get bitten by the vampire, and then you go through like several days of agonizing, terrible
like awful
pain. Yeah, you are like immobilized. Well, no, I guess you don't have to be immobilized.
I don't remember. It's been so long since I've
you
seen
can
and read
be
those.
thrashing and writhing in pain. I think Bella just isn't. But anyway, you are in horrible, horrible pain for like 3 days while the venom courses through your body, and then your heart stops, and then you become a vampire.
In the Shadowhunters novels, there are vampires also, and you have to like drink the blood of a vampire, and then they have to drink your blood, and then you have to be buried underground, and then you have to find your way out from being buried underground, and then as soon as you come out from underground, you have to be fed, and then you're a vampire.
That's more like True Blood.
I've never seen True Blood.
Yeah.
And then in Vampire Diaries, you have to drink vampire blood and have it in your system when you die, and then when you die, you immediately come back to life as a vampire. Except, like, you just wake up. There's no, like, difference or process or whatever. Like, you die, and then you immediately open your eyes, and you're a vampire.
And I think through all these evolutions, like, we saw, if we go back to, like, Interview with the Vampire, the vampires are, like, they're smooth, and they're likable, and they're charismatic, but they also are, I think, very clearly adults, right? Is that fair to say?
Not in today's culture.
No, vampires used to be grown-ups. Like, they naturally, you assume they've been alive a really long time. So even if they look younger, they have this wisdom and knowledge and understanding of the world that not only do you not have as a young human, but you almost couldn't achieve as a human. Because, I mean, like, that's the implicit thought. Like, even if you look at, what was Kirsten Dunst when she was the little girl vampire?
What do you mean? What was she?
Well, I couldn't remember her name.
Oh, geez, I
Whatever.
can't remember.
She's turned into a vampire as a little girl, and she even has this like really creepy level of like adult worldly wisdom, which is very off-putting because even though she's a child, she's been alive a really long time. I don't think vampires now necessarily have that kind of world-weary wisdom, associated with them. Is that fair?
I mean, in all vampire books and TV shows and stuff I've witnessed, they, although like scary ones do, I don't know if that makes sense, but like there are a lot more pieces of culture that have vampires in them that are like friendly. Like they want to be your friend vampires, like Edward Cullen vampires just want to fit in. They just want to be angsty teens that fit in. But like the scary ones always seem to like know everything about vampire history from always, and the friendly vampires are always like, "What? I didn't know about that." What?
Well, I think that and we're going to talk about this in some of the other archetypes, but it's this making these characters sympathetic that has really kind of been marked of part somewhat in our generation, but way more so in yours. Like, and I think part of that comes from making them relatable, and that means making them have flaws and weaknesses. And you know, when you go back to those Anne Rice vampires, like they're cool and they're likable. They're not ultimate bad guys, but they're not people you can see yourself in.
No.
Hopefully,
no, they're very not human.
wow. And even like the Lost Boys, I mean, that has a sympathetic character who's transitioning into a vampire, but the actual vampires in that movie are scary, evil people that, you know, there's no questioning that they lack a soul, and that you know, relates to their character entirely.
Go ahead.
Which is a really interesting point when you bring up like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which has a lot of vampires who are very much just demons. They're just, I mean, they're bad. They just want to kill people, and they are therefore slayed. Slewed in mass. But then you have certain vampires who start to bridge that gap with Angel First, who may I add, goodness is thrust upon him, not by any choice of his own does he get his soul and becomes a good vampire, so to speak. And then Spike, who, you know, chooses that. Not saying one's better than the other, just saying he chose.
Just putting that information
to
out there.
I would also like to say that Spike was still capable of good actions without a soul. He did some bad stuff, but he also like fell in love with Buffy with no soul. And if you follow the comic books, which continue to be canon, he acted nobly without a soul. He lost his soul at one point again, got it back, but it kind of was that, I think that whole arc was there to establish that, you know, with or without a soul, Spike still has innate goodness.
Yes.
I feel like with all of these vampire series of sorts that have to do with vampires being in love with humans, or other way around, there's always some sort of dilemma where it's like you realize the vampire isn't getting any older and the human is going to keep aging. So it's like, well, what do we do? Am I going to be a 50-year-old that's still dating a 17-year-old vampire?
Yeah, that's not good.
Or am I going to turn into a vampire as well?
Yeah.
And I feel like I always kind of want the one who's a human to turn into a vampire, but then I'm like, but then you're a vampire.
Yeah, but I think that fits into like a teen world very well, though, because at that point, what you're gaining is eternal life and eternal youth. And all of those, we kind of talk about that when you're younger, you have this feeling of invincibility. I can do anything. Nothing can stop me. I'll never die. You have this sort of feeling all the time, which is why you might be more prone to risky behavior than an adult. And you see that, like, if you see a character like in Twilight deciding, like, I do want to be a vampire, you're just embracing that. I will be invincible and immortal, and not thinking about like, well, but all of your other family and friends will die and you will keep living, and you're giving up. I mean, most of the time vampires can't have kids.
Yeah.
Right?
So if you wanted to start a family,
No.
I don't know, which is not something you think about much when you're 16 necessarily.
Right.
You know, it is, I don't know, it's fascinating to me just that we've gone from, like, you know, the origins of these monsters, like, you know, like with vampires, we're talking about like Vlad the Impaler and like Anne Bathory, like horrible, evil historical figures. And now we've gotten all the way to the point where even in Buffy, there's like, of course, Buffy would never become a vampire to be with Angel because vampires are still innately bad. Some might break that mold, but they are bad things. So now it's like, nah, it's a great thing to be. You get to live forever.
You get to live forever. Why
be
wouldn't
beautiful.
you want to be one? You sparkle in the sunlight.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I keep mentioning the Vampire Diaries, but it is one of the best television shows of all time. And if you haven't seen it, it has vampires, it has werewolves, it has witches, it has hybrids. Never know what's going to happen next. But I forget what I was saying.
You know what? True Blood has all those too. And True Blood also, I believe, has werepanthers. So
Yes, it does.
Oh, I remember what I was saying about vampires now.
werepanther.
There are two brothers that are two of the main vampires, and one of them, the younger one, decided to be like a good vampire that only drinks animal blood, which I mean, like, is still bad. He's going out there and hunting down like bunnies and stuff and is eating them, but it's better than eating humans.
And it's also better than like Angel's like his choice to just drain the Red Cross of all of its blood supply, essentially.
Yeah, that's bad too.
He also ate rats for a couple of years. That's gross.
That's rough.
But like, there's always the kind of like note in the back of his head that he is still a vampire because his brother like eats humans and stuff all the time and is kind of a jerk, but he doesn't get like angry all the time, and like whenever he drinks human blood he doesn't freak out and need to like kill a bunch of humans because he's used to it. And then there's several times where the younger one will go and start eating humans and then be an awful person for a while and then has to learn how to eat just bunnies again, I guess. But
like the good guys always do.
Eat the bunnies.
Eat bunnies.
Blood.
But I mean, that's again like what you were saying, Taylor. Like they're always kind of bad things. They just have to learn how to be not so bad things, I guess.
Which I mean, like I said, the only thing I can imagine, I mean, unless you have a better answer for me, Riley, why do teenagers love vampires so much? I mean, because my guess is like the immortality, the like invincibility, like vampires are hard to kill.
Yeah.
They're pretty. I mean, we have this new concept of vampires that they're naturally very attractive.
And also, like in the Shadowhunter novels, one of the only human characters turns into a vampire, and they describe how as soon as he becomes a vampire, he became more attractive.
That's like in Twilight too. In Twilight,
he
it
didn't need
is
his glasses anymore because his eyesight was perfect. So he took his glasses off, and his braces. He didn't have braces, but like his
braces fell from his
muscles. His muscles grew, and he got taller, and all that kind of stuff. Like, why do vampires always have to be attractive?
Just seems like they're just a better version of us. Well, that's was that the last season of American Horror Story had vampires, and they were just the most beautiful people. Lady Gaga was a vampire.
Yeah,
it is very interesting because it takes they're almost like superheroes now. Like it took vampires out of the realm of villain and into the like you cross over into, well, they just have special powers and they have their own set of flaws. Sometimes they eat people, but most of the time they're pretty good and they're really beautiful, and sometimes they can fly
and sometimes they sparkle.
Now partnering along with vampires are often werewolves. Natural enemies, vampires and werewolves.
This is a more recent established fact.
Yes, I personally have always been a big fan of werewolves, especially if we're talking the Edward Jacob debate.
You're on the side of Jacob in that debate?
Jacob all the way.
What?
All the way.
No. Taylor, you're our tiebreaker.
I've already put my weight in on this. I'm Team Steve Buscemi.
That's right.
That's my answer. But I mean, if I had to choose a vampire or a werewolf in any of that's hard. I probably would fault to vampires, but not in that.
See?
Their skin feels like marble and they're cold all the time.
Vampires werewolves are dogs. Werewolves are actual dogs.
But they smell like the outside, like trees.
Like wet dog.
No, they're warm and loyal. I'll take a werewolf.
You're describing a dog. You're describing a pet.
I do think that this debate ultimately comes down to, are you a cat person or a dog person?
Well, I'm a cat person, but I still choose werewolf.
But
cats are cold.
Yeah.
They don't like snuggling with you. They're standoffish.
Yeah.
They're independent.
They'll scratch or bite you.
Yeah. You literally just described a dog. You said he is warm. He is loyal. He is soft. That's a dog.
Maybe not the smartest one.
I feel like werewolves, I mean, even though we have like the classic example of like, you know, teenagers and monsters is Teen Wolf. That is the intersection of this podcast is Teen Wolf, who is super cool because he was a werewolf, but he also could play a mean game of hoops.
Yeah.
You know, which what else do you need from a teenager, really? I feel like werewolves, it's a harder sell because they actually turn into giant animals.
They're just giant dogs.
Yeah, I mean, no one's ever looked at a werewolf like fully transformed and been like, dang,
That's one hot werewolf.
No, but Taylor Lautner out of werewolf form.
Sydney, in that movie, he's like 18.
I'm just saying I can appreciate a nice set of abs.
Okay, let's move on. I'm uncomfortable.
I mean, I would have to
Talking
say,
about abs.
if we're going to talk most attractive werewolf, and I'm sorry to Michael J. Fox for this, but I'm going to have to go with American Werewolf in London.
That's an attractive werewolf.
David, is that the character's name? I think so.
I
had a customer at a coffee shop I worked at a couple years ago,
and he looked so much like that actor that played that character. And I really wanted to compliment him, but I don't know if that's like, I don't know how much that tracks. Like, hey, you remember that movie, American Werewolf in London? You look like that hot werewolf lead actor.
Not when he's like a werewolf.
No, like when he's like a cool dude. And I did actually tell him that, and his response was, I get that all the time.
Really?
I was like, wow. Okay.
Was it him?
No, it wasn't him. No, I mean, because he was, actively like in his late 20s, whereas this movie was made a long time ago. But
yeah,
It's time travel.
So
maybe
gets a lot of that.
Time traveling werewolf. Now that's terrifying.
Oh, that's cool. Are you kidding?
When we're talking about, like, I've never seen those two particular productions, but I have seen Twilight, and I have seen Vampire Diaries, which does have werewolves.
Of
And
course.
in Twilight, they turn, like, whatever they want to, right?
Mm-hmm.
The werewolves, I mean.
Yes.
Like, they can become werewolves.
They can just
whenever they
become
want to.
werewolves, yes.
Which
Right.
is just throwing the established lore out the window. Like,
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say. In Vampire Diaries, only one night a month, like, or whenever there is a full moon, I think it's one night a month, right?
Yeah.
That's the only night where they turn to werewolves, and it's not like they choose. Like, they just instinctively become a werewolf, and they don't really remember what they do for this, 6-hour period. They're a werewolf, and then they turn back into a human for another 30 days.
Right.
Which is, like, I feel like more on target with the original fiction of werewolves.
That's pretty consistent.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oz and Buffy, that was his modus operandi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a werewolf on Buffy, and yeah, Seth Green was a werewolf on Buffy.
I don't know why that makes me laugh.
Yeah.
Seth Green is a werewolf.
He was an adorable werewolf on Buffy, except not when he was a werewolf, just when he was Seth Green, because
Oh, that's right. I remember he was on that show because you showed me like the very first episode of Buffy ever, and I was like, who that? What's he doing?
Well, he wasn't on the very first. He wasn't on the
Very first episode of like one season. Or
Oh,
something.
okay. Okay. Fair enough. But it also falls into the realm of werewolves when they become werewolves cannot like reason with you. Like they don't stop and go like, you're my friend.
I'm not gonna eat you.
I won't eat you, woof woof.
They might eat you. They also might cheat on their girlfriends.
such a great teen plot point in Buffy. It's like, I was cheated on Willow because he was a werewolf.
That was the only reason though.
That's your excuse every time.
But not like in Twilight where the wolves like are.
You can talk to the wolves and like pet them like they're actual dogs.
Yeah. Now they don't talk back, but they do
They
communicate with each
understand
other.
you.
They communicate with each other through telepathy.
Yeah, which is just I don't get.
And they can communicate with Edward because he can read minds. Anyway.
What?
I don't think werewolves. I don't think it's as like we talk about. I think you write a whole dissertation on vampires and teens and how that plays into like the adolescent experience and growing and changing. And I think you could see like some direct parallels between werewolves and teens. Like
Yes, of
Puberty.
Puberty.
I think that's the correlation there. It's like your body starts changing in weird, horrifying ways, and suddenly your brain, you're not entirely in control of it all the time.
And there's hair everywhere.
You get weird impulses and giant teeth. That doesn't happen.
Well, wait. But you're right. I don't think that it's ever going to occupy the same amount of weight or space in teen culture as vampires do, because you're right. I mean, the simple fact, you can't make like someone who is currently in the werewolf state super hot. Nobody just wants to like fall in love with that character.
No, yes, you can. It's been done. It's been done.
Who?
The Backstreet Boys Everybody video. Brian is such a hot werewolf.
Only example ever.
Oh my god, that's such a great video. And it's like every horror Nick is a sexy mummy. And that's not a thing that's ever been done or tried or attempted or should be done again.
No, where are the mummies? Mummies are poorly represented in as we do this like teen makeover to make monsters hot.
No.
Where are the hot mummies?
I swear, and somebody please help me. Do mummies control bees? Because I thought I heard that.
I thought mummies controlled scarabs.
I swear there was a bee relation somewhere. Maybe I'm wrong. Everyone tells me I'm wrong.
I always thought they controlled those flying beetles.
Yeah.
That would make sense. That would make more sense. I just thought there were bees involved.
Now,
Another monster
exactly.
that has been teenified over the years is witches.
Yes.
Witches have been around for always. I mean, in real. let me rephrase that. Witches were real. Long time ago in America, and now we make them part of our fiction, even though they continue to be real.
This is from an oral history report that Riley did today in school.
Witches are real.
Were real for a long time in America.
Is that how I talk? Is that how I talk? Are you stereotyping me? Yes, you are. You are making me sound like a typical teenage girl from all of your favorite teenage movies that you love to watch when no one else is around. Sydney Smurl McElroy.
You kind of just sounded like I was doing you just
Yeah,
now.
that was
That's not how I sound.
on the nose, I have to say.
All right, bye everybody. I'm just gonna let you all take this episode over.
Wait.
I'm gonna go.
Let me clarify when we talk about witches here that we are talking about like movie and TV and like the media stereotype of the like horror movie villain witch.
But just
Right.
know witches
Not-
are real.
Well, we're not
Well-
talking about the practice of Wicca. Like
Right.
I just want to be
Wiccans, there's paganism, there are people that actually
Yeah.
identify as witches, and that's cool. We're just talking about popular culture representation.
exactly.
Yeah.
We are talking about
Like
that
Sabrina.
kind of that exactly.
Exactly.
Using the word witch to mean that. I just want to clarify that because otherwise we're talking about very different things all together.
I'm sorry, I just got excited.
No, you can get excited.
Well, now in
Talking about real witches.
I mean, some of these actors might be real witches in their off time. We're not sure. We don't know that.
We don't.
What
we
if
don't know.
that's how they cast witches?
They look
They only cast a real one.
because then it would just be like Stevie Nicks in every one of these roles, right?
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
What-
a little shout out to Stevie Nicks for you, Mom. I know you listen to the show, and I know you love Stevie Nicks.
She's the white witch. Now,
I love Stevie Nicks.
well, and she was in Coven, American Horror Story Coven, kind
Yeah,
of.
she was.
And she was hesitant about that because she was afraid too many people associated her with witchcraft, and so she thought that would feed into it. But then ultimately decided it was the thing she wanted to be a part of.
Because that's also part of her super cool mystique.
Well, it is.
But witches, I think witches had already been kind of adopted as like a neat thing in teen culture and an exciting like movie or TV show thing when we were younger. I mean, you referenced Riley's Sabrina the Teenage Witch,
Which I called Serena before we started.
which is an Archie comic.
Serena the Teenage Witch?
No, Sabrina the
Oh.
Teenage Witch. Initially, a very different version of Sabrina.
Yeah.
Especially the ants are very different. They look like in the comic book Sabrina the Teenage Witch, her ants look like old-fashioned witches with the pointy hats and the big
Right.
robe and all that, and carrying brooms around. But Sabrina was certainly a television show as well. She was like a cool witch who did like fun teen spells. I don't know.
By fun teen spells, what do you mean? Like getting her homework done with a wave of her wand?
Yep.
That's it.
Like getting a cool prom dress. I don't know. Like she did cool teen spells.
You know what show I completely forgotten about that is the modern day equivalent of Sabrina the Teenage Witch?
What?
Wizards of Waverly Place.
Those are wizards, not witches.
But I mean, like, same principle.
Well, yes and no, because I think you also had in like you look at movies like The Craft. I think is a good like quintessential teen witch movie from our era, where you have these 4 women who are somewhat outcasts. They're not accepted by the rest of their classmates. They're in high school and they're they don't fit in. And also, and I don't know if it is a function of that or alongside that, they begin to practice witchcraft, not necessarily having like something about them. I mean, that's not assumed, especially with 2 of them, that they naturally have some sort of innate power, but that it is something that anyone can learn and practice, and that people who are drawn to it as like a way to distinguish themselves. Like, I am different, I'm on the outside, and I am powerful and strong. Now 2 of them are like natural witches, but or at least one of them is. I don't know. Firuza Balk is questionable.
I think it's also, and I think the 90s were rich with really like strong female witches, really like interesting, likable, powerful characters. And I think that kind of might go hand in hand with that third wave feminism, like sort of the girl power movement. You had The Craft, and you had Charmed, you had Willow and Buffy, you had practical magic. Like, there were women that could, take control of their lives with an innate power that they had, whereas, maybe not a physical strength, but like a something from within, which is, I don't know. I think that there was like an underlying sort of psyche to all of those movies and ideas.
I think you're right, because especially you bring up practical magic, which was you've seen that movie, right, Riley? Which the witchcraft that they're practicing in practical magic is very much rooted in their femininity. It's very much a female oriented like power source. I mean, it's not just something that, I mean, because even when they call a circle, when they decide like they need more witches to help them, they're women, correct? Yeah. I mean, I don't think there are any men involved.
No, and then that's it's almost. I think there's an inference in a lot of these movies that it's sort of the female power, which is not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily read in reality, but I think that was. I think a lot of these, just as much as there's the teen fantasy with vampires to like live forever and be young and beautiful forever. I think there's a wish fulfillment there, which is something that always appeals in popular culture. That your ability to, like you said with The Craft, when you're an outcast, when you're different, but also just as a woman to find strength, like extreme power in a way that real life doesn't garner towards you.
Right. No, I think that's true. And I think you see that represented in Buffy through Willow, who becomes such a powerful character. Through sort of her own self-discovery. I think you can find a nice parallel in her as like, she starts as that like typical nerdy, the smart girl. And as she becomes this strong, like incredibly powerful, almost too powerful witch on the show, she also discovers, for instance, her sexual preference, and really, comes into her own as a character, recognizing who she truly is and who she always has been, and accepting everything about herself that's been true from the beginning, but she was too kind of timid and held back to recognize in the beginning, and then is able to embrace as the show goes on.
Now, you know what my favorite witch fiction. You know what my favorite
Make it work.
Witchiction, I don't know.
Hocus Pocus.
We'll find.
It's funny, it's goofy, it's not serious witchery.
Oh, the Sanderson sisters.
It's a great movie.
Also Halloween Town. Like, I don't think we've talked about Halloween Town enough. That's about like a teenage girl discovering.
Who can ever talk about
powers.
Halloween Town enough?
Halloween Town is a great movie.
Do you think, though, all these things we're talking about, and like we haven't even talked about the worst witch, like going way back into witch movies. Now, there are witches I understand on your favorite program.
What is that, Sydney?
The Vampire Diaries.
Yes.
And are they all, kind of like in all these older things we've talked about, are they all female?
Yes. Well, no. There's a boy.
Because you would assume that, like, when you look at, you mentioned Wizards of Waverly Place, and then that makes me think naturally of Harry Potter.
Yeah.
That, that witchcraft, wizardry, magic, that ability to tap into some sort of magic or, whatever, that is becoming a more gender neutral thing.
Yeah.
That magic now is its own thing. It's not necessarily like the power of being a woman expressed in our ability to make objects levitate and candles alight, but that it is a magic unto itself that all humans have access to.
Yeah. I was just trying to think, but no, there is a male witch in the show, and it's cool because the vampires come from like Civil War era period of time in my favorite program. But the witches also come from this time, except they're not immortal like the vampires are. So where you have like the same two brothers that are living in like 2012 that were living in like the 1850s and 60s.
Sure.
Instead of having the same witches, you have like an ancestry line of witches. So it's like the vampires know who the witches are because of their last name and because of who they look like in terms of their ancestors, but the witches have no idea who the vampires are or what they are, or even what they are, that they're witches. It's kind of like the main witch, Bonnie, finds out from her grandma that she's a witch and doesn't believe her at first because it's like, that's crazy, there's no such thing, but then she just has the powers.
Okay.
It's crazy. It's wild. But then she meets a boy who moves into town and is also a witch and is from like another line of ancestry from that same area and the same time period, and it all connects and it's all very cool.
Which I think it's almost, we talked about like witches as being this representative tool back when we were younger, especially as a young woman, as a way of like, maybe this is the secret power that my extra X chromosome gives me that I don't get to know about. If I could just tap into it, maybe it's there for all of us.
Like witchery is a sex-linked trait.
Exactly, it's an X-linked trait, and that's why only women possess it. No, it moves it from that into almost something even a little younger. Now it's more about like the fun of magic,
the
power of magic, and not necessarily a power that women need.
I mean, right. I can't be the only one that would watch something to do with witches and then be like, if I look at this, I'm gonna levitate this book and it's gonna happen.
We've all done that.
Light as a feather, stiff as a board. Light as a feather, stiff as a board.
We've all had that moment where we've stared at something and thought, I'm gonna make that pen roll right off the desk right now. I'm gonna make it
start raining right.
Well,
now. And then it doesn't rain.
I mean, I do think, like, historically, when we talk about witches, like, it is tied to femininity. I mean, there were men
it has to be. Yeah.
Like, I think, and what I like in witch history, I make up for in booze history. And when I was reading about early beer brewing, women would brew beer in their kitchens at home. And because we didn't understand a lot about, like, microbiology, obviously, we knew if you kept using the same, like, wooden paddle to make your beer, it would keep indoctrinating and keep making beer, but we didn't get much more than that. And so, like, when the beer would go off, which would happen because we're dealing with fermented microbes and stuff, it was witchcraft, and the woman would be like, burn at the stake for making bad beer. And I think that's kind of, it's like this thing that a woman was making that no one understood, and so it's clearly her fault when people get sick from it. Like, there's definitely a tie-in with, like, even when you look at, like witchcraft, it involves, like, using herbs and using, like, flowers. And, like, it's very much like a in the kitchen kind of thing. I think there's a bit of a revenge fantasy with, like, the witch playing out as, like, a powerful figure as a female. That hopefully, we can move on and, like, just enjoy the idea of magic. But there's definitely that cultural tie.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely there because you have to assume that there was this long period in history where basically we don't take the time to understand what women are thinking or feeling or saying because we don't really listen to them. So we're just assuming that they have some sort of power. We don't know. We didn't talk to them because that would involve letting them speak. And, in history, that wasn't popular. So maybe now that women are no longer these mysterious mercurial creatures and like, people too. Maybe that notion goes away.
The last monster I want to talk about, which I think maybe wasn't as popular based on what you all talked about before the show in your all's teen period, is zombies.
Yes, zombies, which are so hot right now.
Yeah, they're all the rage because they're coming up soon in real life.
Zombies.
Well, they're actually hot right now, though, and I've got to say, Riley, that's disturbing. Your generation disturbs me with the ability to make sexy zombies.
Where have you seen sexy zombies?
There's iZombie, and she's a very pretty lady, but more importantly, Warm Bodies, which is a rom-com featuring a male zombie lead.
Oh, I have seen that. Okay. Yeah. We have done that. We've made some.
That's a really interesting evolution of the concept of a zombie, which like is rooted in the idea of like reanimation of a corpse or like bringing back someone who has died.
Like someone that can't talk or think or do anything except look for humans to eat.
Right. Like zombies were initially like a cautionary tale, like don't try to raise people from the dead because they will not come back
normal.
Right. They'll come back these sort of like animalistic, flesh-driven, scary things.
Yeah. And the emergence of the popular, like the Romero era zombie was really a reflection on consumerism. So there was no individuality in the zombie horde. That was the direct link there. So it's kind of funny that now it's like, just as much as we've taken the vampires and made them sexy, it's like we've taken the zombies, which were supposed to represent a faceless horde, and made them human.
I made some.
You missed the point.
And that is very weird because I will say that other than like you mentioned, like when I think about Night of the Living Dead and Day of the Dead and Dawn of the Dead and all the various dead movies.
Of the dead movies.
Of the dead movies.
Of the dead.
I mean, like I don't think zombies were a huge touchstone for us growing up. They were not. They had not completely inundated popular culture the way they have now with shows like The Walking Dead.
I feel like with your all's era, it was not the thought that this was what would happen one day, that everyone on planet Earth would one day become a zombie and only the select few would be left to fight for their lives among these hordes of zombies.
No.
I think you all, it was like a monster, like a vampire or a werewolf. Like it was not something that people talked about, everyone becoming one, which I guess is what's happening now.
And I don't know if that ties in with, I mean, because I don't know the answer to this question. Are apocalyptic fears stronger or more prevalent than they used to be?
Well, we've talked about that before. Like, look at all the books we read.
About the apocalypse?
Yeah, teen fiction, apocalyptic
That's true.
books.
So, I mean, maybe that plays in with it one way. I mean, people like to talk about the way the world ends is that we all become zombies.
It'll happen one day.
Which is almost like a de-evolution of the human race. It's like an interesting biological theory that what's going to happen is instead of progressing as a species, we're just going to stop. We're just going to start eating each other's brains and that'll be the end of it.
Which when you look at like the Walking Dead fiction behind zombies, they kind of, if you haven't seen all of The Walking Dead, skip ahead like 20 seconds. Because this, I guess, this is a spoiler, kind of, not really that big of a deal.
This is a spoiler. Skip ahead.
But everyone has the zombie disease in them. It is not transferred whenever you get a zombie bite. And it is just, it activates itself somewhat whenever you are bitten by a zombie and die. So it's like something has happened in the world. We were all affected by this zombie disease. And now we all have it. So no matter what, we will all turn into zombies.
Right.
Which is weird because I feel like that is not always the way. I feel like it was either like you get bitten by a zombie once and you turn into one immediately, like with vampires, or they kill you and eat you.
Right. Or somebody gets bitten by a zombie and they're alive, but they're a ticking time bomb.
Like they try to hide the bite.
Yeah, and you have to decide whether or not you're going to shoot them or whatever.
Like you try to chop their leg off.
I always have a hard time in zombie movies and then there are a couple that are guilty of this, where it's like, okay, the blood is a transformation mechanism. Like if if they bite you or whatever, you're infected. And yet then you have like your heroes like mowing through like a field of zombies and just like blood's going everywhere. But like, that's cool. But if they bite you, like what about all the blood you just got covered in?
I know some of that got in your mouth and your eyes. You have mucous membranes everywhere.
Well, that's what I kind of appreciate that about 28 Days Later, where it's like the little drop of blood in like the eyeball infects the dude. It's like
exactly.
That reads. That makes sense to me. I think that zombies are kind of the perfect storm right now because, you know, the idea of a virus that could infect, you know, spread through humanity and infect everyone it's not so unbelievable. It's not as out there as something like werewolves or vampires. Those are fictional creatures. The idea of a plague that could, you know, like alter us in such a way to make us sort of mindless is totally viable.
Yeah. No, that's definitely true. I think that plays into our fears. But then the idea that you could, and maybe that's why, like, if we wonder why has your generation made the zombie sexy?
I don't even know.
Well, maybe it's really just the idea that zombies, instead of seeing them as kind of the next evolution of the monster, like zombies aren't I wouldn't call a zombie a monster in the same way we think about like these classic, these classic horror movie creatures.
Yeah.
Zombies are us.
In a different form.
We are the monster. That's us. Yes. But then, but I think like that Hollywood has said, well, I don't know, we've made vampires sexy, we made werewolves sexy. Why not? Why not zombies? We're gonna make zombies sexy. Everybody likes zombies. Everybody likes sexy. Let's just make them. Now we'll join them together.
Make a sandwich.
Sexy zombies. And not think about the fact that like specifically, no, these are humans who then became zombies and therefore cannot be human-like now.
They're supposed to look like corpses.
Right. And they're not supposed to have like frontal lobe function.
You know, but I think this is true. Our monsters always come from like some sort of psychological fear or worry. I think that, you know, our monsters are sort of reflections of ourselves, our popular monsters. And I think that the zombie, whereas if you're a vampire or a werewolf, you're special. If you're a witch, you're special. You have power. The zombie is pretty much just as disposable as a human, maybe even more so.
Yeah.
They are part of a faceless mass. They are just trying to stay alive and feed themselves. Like, I think that maybe maybe this is just me projecting onto zombies, but I think there's a reason that we're starting to sympathize with the zombie. Riley, you're the tired one. I mean, come on. Sometimes I'm just like, I just gotta get through this day. I gotta survive.
Definitely. I mean,
like the zombie is the ultimate sympathetic truth. Like you're just one of a faceless mass who's just trying to get by.
Looking at all the 4 vampire or monster, monster types we've looked at over this past show. I don't even know what I'm saying. It seems like vampires and werewolves and witches are all things that at one point we've all thought like, wouldn't it be cool if like I could be a vampire and live forever, or like turn into a wolf, or have special witch powers? That one especially. I feel like we all wanted to be a witch at some point. But zombies are the thing that I feel like no one is like, wouldn't it be cool if I was a dead human that ate other humans?
Wouldn't that be neat?
Like, wouldn't that be cool if I had that ability? Like, that's the bad one. That's the one that you don't want to be because you're not a person with abilities anymore. You're the exact opposite. You're a person with no abilities.
I mean, you can get like stabbed with lots of things and keep going. That ability.
You have literally one way to die. Like, nothing else can kill you.
Well, depending on your lore. Yeah.
What do we all identify with most strongly?
Witches.
Oh.
Are you sure a zombie?
I'm a witch.
Sid, I think I know your answer, but why don't you tell me?
What do you think I am?
I think you're going to say werewolf.
I was going to say werewolf.
I knew it.
I feel like that. I mean, I don't want to be a werewolf. I've never thought like, man, I hope that I can turn into a wild animal tonight, get stripped down naked and run around and eat things.
You've thought about it.
No, but I think that probably reflects my personality most closely. What about you, Tay?
I think I on my best days I'm a witch. On my worst days I'm a zombie. Can I be a zombie witch?
That. I'd agree with that. I feel that too.
Yeah.
When can I just be a mummy, guys? When is
You are a mummy.
That's the thing. We got it. This is our still buffering trademark idea.
Sexy mummies.
Sexy mummies are
Hasn't
coming.
been done except for you, Nick Carter. You were ahead of your time.
2018.
Let's make it happen.
We're gonna make the new teen hit is gonna be an apocalyptic series about mummies that are hot, and have great abs. Like they'll have bandages wrapped around everywhere but their abs.
And their dreamy eyes.
And their dreamy eyes.
Bandages
And
where
their,
you need them.
and their hair that just falls artfully across one dreamy eye.
So they basically have bandages that go around their nose to their neck. And then bandages that start at their butt and go to their feet.
And their bees, their bee friends, right?
They're bee friends.
I think they're scarabs, but sure.
Bee friends.
Sure, they're bee friends.
I swear I've read that or seen that. I know someone out there will either tell me I'm super wrong or tell me I'm super right.
Sure. Okay.
It might even be referencing a Yonan Vasquez comic where there is a mummy and he just goes, bees, and bees come out of his mouth. And that might be the only moment that happens, the association, but I swear it's a bigger idea.
Well, thank you, sisters. Thank you, zombie witch and witch sisters.
You're welcome.
And thank you, listeners, as always. It is so wonderful to do this show and to have so many wonderful people out there who listen and comment and are part of our Facebook group, Still Buffering on Facebook, who tweeted us at StillBuff if you like something or want to comment. If you want to suggest something, email us at stillbuffering@maximumfun.org. And by the way, maximumfun.org is where you can check out a lot of other wonderful podcasts within our network. I would advise you to go there and listen to some today. And you can also check out maximumfun.org/Jumbotron if you would like us to read some sort of message. A Jumbotron is a message that we can send directly, well, through our podcast to someone you love or like that or whatever, to say something nice to them, wish them well, whatever. So maximumfun.org/Jumbotron if you want to do that. And thank you to the Novellas for our theme song, Baby You Change Your Mind.
This has been Still Buffering, a sister's guide to teens through the ages. I am Riley Smurl.
I'm Sydney McElroy.
And I'm Taylor Smurl.
I am a teenager.
And I was boo. I said boo because it was a spooky episode instead.
Ty is a pedantic person. I think when he pronounces these words, it's in a very show-offy way. Gyro.
Gyro.
Sacre bleu.
Sacre bleu.
Ayers Rock.
Uluru.
What you are witnessing is real. The participants are not actors. They are actual litigants with real cases. They call in via Skype to Judge John Hodgman's court, the real People's Court. Now I call you to Judge John Hodgman's internet court. Find it at MaximumFun.org or wherever you download podcasts. MaximumFun.org.
Comedy and culture. Artist owned.
Listener supported.